To meet the growing needs of their communities, as well as improving quality of care, healthcare providers often look towards construction as a way of meeting these demands. Construction projects obviously create budget and time concerns to providing cost-effective and efficient care. But fortunately, there are steps that they can take to ensure a more successful construction project. In this episode, I'm going to talk to Christine Dickinson, Principal, Facilities, Capital, and Construction for Vizient, to uncover these steps to a more successful healthcare construction project. Christine brings more than 25 years of experience in the construction industry, and specifically 20 years in healthcare. She was integral in the incubation and development of Vizient Facility and Construction Solutions. And as a program lead for the Western region, she implemented value-driven solutions positively impacting over $11 billion in member master building programs. In addition, she created a member-specific process for establishing and maintaining owner standards, which delivers savings through utilization on all member facility maintenance and construction projects. Welcome to Keeping the Lights On. I'm your host, Todd Reed, and on this podcast, I connect with the owners and pros who design, build, and maintain our electrical, communications, and industrial world to explore the best ways forward. Let's get into the show. If I were to visit you, or some of the guests were to visit you in your hometown, where might you take us to go eat?
Yeah, great question. And honestly, I have a hard time answering that because there's so many places that I would want to take you. But so dinner, one of my favorite spots. I don't get to go there very often, but I do love to go to Pacific Coast Grill. It's right on the ocean. And they've got kind of indoor-outdoor dining. It's good food, good quality food. And what's great is you're right there on the ocean, so you can watch a sunset. Or if you're there during the day and you've got kids, they can go outside and play in the sand and pop back in to eat their meal. You can continue to sit there and enjoy it. Ocean air, it's just really fabulous. Another favorite spot is Mr. A's, kind of the opposite of Pacific Coast Grill. It's a little bit more buttoned up. It's at the top of a building, and actually, if you have flown into San Diego and you have sat on, if your window is on your right, then you can actually see it as you come into land, because it's on the final approach. It's off to the right-hand side, right before you cross the freeway to the landing strip. And there are awesome views from there. So you can see the airport, you can see the airplanes take off and land, you can see the harbor, you can see the ships come in and go out, you can see sunset, and the food is really, really good. So that's definitely a favorite spot. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention my favorite taco shop. So El Indio is a family favorite of ours. It's also down by the airport. Some people love to make it their first stop or their last stop before they get on the airplane. They're known for their chips, obviously made in-house, but they season them with paprika and maybe some other spices and salt. And so it's not just your average tortilla chip.
Wow. Sounds great. Well, you mentioned a few places there, which is awesome. I always like that. So we have a lot of choices there when we go eat. What's your favorite at one of those places? Like, something or the last thing you had that was great, or?
Yeah. So I'm going to go with the taco stand. So El Indio, or any, there's a multitude of favorites, but El Indio, I love a good bean and cheese burrito. But other than that, maybe carnitas or fish tacos, and also the California burrito, which is maybe unique to my area. They put French fries in there or potatoes. But definitely a bean and cheese burrito. You can never go wrong with that.
Like I said, I was looking some of those up, some of the restaurants you had mentioned, and I like El Indio's history and of course the beach side. I'm always on board for that. But I'm picturing like sitting up on Mr. A's where you have a view of the city, right? And you could definitely, no doubt, find a healthcare facility in that view somewhere. There's a hospital somewhere in there, and you can kind of see them. But so we're going to spend a little time on healthcare and healthcare construction here. So we'll be talking about that. But before we do that, let's set a foundation together. I have two kind of immediate questions to set that foundation. What is Vizient, And what is it that you and your team do there, kind of high level?
Yeah, great question. So Vizient is a healthcare performance improvement company. We are backed by a group purchasing organization, which is a set of national type contracts that can be utilized with our providers. So Vizient as a company, we primarily work in the acute care market, but we support many other markets as well, as such as long-term living, non-acute care. We do some stadium work because there's a healthcare element to that. We've got some K through 12 universities and a few commercial type, maybe restaurants that we support. So really diversified as far as the markets that we support. And we have a set of solutions that we bring to all of those, to our clients, which we call providers. And those set of solutions really vary. So it could be a labor, focused on labor. It could be focused on physician preferred items. It could be med surg, pharmacy, dietary, activation. We've got a sustainability team. I work in the indirect spend team, is specifically focusing on facilities and construction. But in all of the work that we do, no matter, which team is coming in, we're really developing and bringing solutions for our providers that are data and analytics led. So helping them make more informed decisions and to improve their businesses as well. So the team that I work in, as I mentioned, is indirect spend team. More specifically, I focus on facilities, construction, and energy. So our team typically gets brought in by a provider, a healthcare system in my case, for very large building programs. So these are typically multi-year, multi-millions of dollars, maybe billions of dollars in many cases. And they've got us in there for a variety of reasons. So we implement in a couple of different ways, but we can come in and help them through their buyout process, just aligning where we've got, again, tapping into those national agreements that are written, tapping into those agreements to help ensure that the contractors have that information when they're bidding the project. So they would call a gray bar, for instance, and say, hey, I'm working at, XYZ health system, they're Vizient. Could you make sure that the pricing is passed along? So we've got contract pricing in place. A lot of times that pricing is actually adjusted to meet market conditions or the building program that's at hand. So a lot of times the contract pricing may be a guardrail. Some of our health systems look at that as the new ceiling, and then it gets adjusted based on the market conditions and the size of the project. And then other health systems bring us in and they have us helping them develop standards. And I'm going to tell you, so I've been in this role, this is my 15th year. When I first started 15 years ago, standards were not really a focus. I was working with a key health system here in Southern California, and they actually did want to develop standards. And this was not Kaiser. This was somebody else. And so the start of our engagement there was really focused around helping them build out standards that could be implemented on any of their projects. And we actually continued to work with them for about 10 years on that effort. So some health systems have us developing standards or preferences, and then aggregating the volume. So imagine there may be a health system that has a couple of campuses. So they might be in 2 different locations within Southern California. And they may each have building programs of their own. And so we will go in and look for the commonality of products, put together a market basket, and take that out to the market, to the supplier community, and have it be priced. And from that, the health system makes the selection as far as what product they want to go with as a preference or as a standard. And then that gets built into all future, most of the future building programs are instances where it might not be the right solution. But those standards and preferences get implemented across the projects. And our team helps do that and then helps ensure that it stays in there through the submittal process, helps through the bidding process to make sure that the pricing is extended the way that it should be, and sees it through to final completion with that health system.
Okay. Let's kind of look at healthcare systems and like, what are the challenges do healthcare systems face when undertaking a construction project?
Well, there's a lot, but I'm going to say the biggest challenge is really around meeting the demands of the community in the timeline that may be, and the timeline that's associated with it, and keeping, holding to the budgets that have been established. That's probably the primary challenge that they have. And to go in line with that, the demands and the timelines of the health systems, it's an ever-changing environment. And, even today with the influence or the influx of the GLP-1s, so the Ozempics, the Zepbound, the weight loss drugs, I read an article recently where actually bariatric surgeries are down. And so that would be something that may actually influence what a health system does as far as their programming, in the future. So taking all of those environmental influences and adjusting to them and meeting the demands of them from, quantity as well as timing of the demands is really challenging, I think, for the health systems. And as you go into building programs, sometimes there's health systems that really aren't, they may do this, once every 10 years. They might be smaller. And so, a building program may not come around as often. And so, let's say they completed one 10 years ago. Well, it's likely that there's been leadership turnover in that time. And so any of your lessons learned would likely be lost, from the prior building program to the one that's occurring today. So that makes some of the, depending on the size of the health system or hospital, there's different influences that come in. But ultimately, they are challenged with that time and budget and meeting those constraints.
Well, that's a lot of challenges. Can you think of any more that a healthcare system might, that they come across when they're building out?
Yeah, today, so as they go into a building program, not only is it budget and time, but it's also now diversity, sustainability, and managing energy, and how do you sprinkle that into your overall building program and make sure that you're meeting the needs of the requirements that may have been set by either your local jurisdictions or maybe state jurisdictions as well. And as these health systems right now, this has been going on for a while, but as health systems are growing, you see a lot of acquisitions occurring. So that makes it challenging in itself because you are going to have a disparity in systems that are installed. So then it's a matter of how do you mesh all of those systems together and create something that works on going forward. So as you go into a building program, like how do you deal with the old and the new and making it all work well together. So different in dealing with disparate systems, you also have a challenge in the sense that as a health system, as a facilities engineer, you may have certain preferences. It's a business of relationships, and when you get into a challenge or something goes wrong, like you've got to have those go-to people to call. And so those relationships is very relationship based, right? And so those relationships, that person may have a preference as far as a supplier or a manufacturer or part, and it's because of that same thing. Maybe they were in a situation where they were in a time of need, and so they've developed that. I know this is my go-to person, and then same with electrical MEP contractors. So they have relied on certain manufacturers or certain suppliers, and there's a sense of dependability, that they've developed in a relationship that they've developed. So all of those things combined together, whether it be the acquisition of an old system, an old health system, and bringing it into your current system and trying to make sure that those systems mesh. They're not going to initially. And then just the relationships and the preferences that are already established and come into play when a project is being designed and engineered.
What do what do the standards look like for a healthcare system? Like how do they kind of manifest at the end after you have worked on these?
Yeah, so it depends on the system, honestly, and there's two ways that you can go. You can go with the performance spec, or you can go with a very defined manufacturer, make and model, and or there might be a hybrid of the two. So that really depends on what the health system's objective is, and we follow their lead if we're there helping them with this. What I can say is that based on some of my prior experiences, it is interesting when you look at the different procurement models. So there's design bid build, there's design build, and what you get as far as a product. And so I feel very strongly, regardless of how a project is approached from a procurement standpoint or from a contracting standpoint, design bid build or design build, that it's important to have guardrails around, as a health system or a hospital and medical center, what do you want? And this holds true even for ambulatory surgical centers. It really goes across any spectrum. So what do you want as far as products in your facility? So for instance, ceiling tile. Many of the manufacturers have the same type of tile. There are going to be nuances that each of them have, something that differentiates them from the next manufacturer, but they all have very similar look, efficiency, sound absorption, in the tile. And so you could probably find something, that would meet your needs. If you have a standard or a preference built around that, we would help a health system basically identify which type of tile is going to go into what type of a space. Meaning, you're going to have a different type of tile in back of house versus public space versus an exam room versus, so really defining what your expectations are for the different spaces, and identifying what would be acceptable. So when projects start, there's a lot of time spent by engineering design teams asking questions. What do you want? What do you like? And so I feel like having standards or preferences built helps alleviate some of those questions and helps speed up the time of design, time to construction. And it also starts to really honestly develop something that's predictable for the contractors. Like, they know what to expect. A lot of contractors work at a particular health system for years on end. And so once they start to learn that health system, and if they know that they have standards or preferences, they know that that's the go-to, and that's what they should be, that's what they should be supplying for the project. So it starts to streamline the overall design and the front end of the project.
Okay. Yeah. What so standards sound great, like the the golden ticket to nirvana, but I'm guessing there are some concerns. What are concerns about adopting standards that you see?
Yeah, so I would say the top concern that I hear is this going to limit my ability to get good pricing. So the sense is that if a supplier is identified as a standard, that they're going to have to pay more for that. That they will, the price will be inflated because they know that they're going to get the work. That's probably the main concern. The other would be, is it going to limit my choices? So it'll go, maybe thinking, oh, it's got to all be white paint. No, it doesn't all have to be white paint. You can still have a lot of flexibility, a lot of choice in your standards, and really still have a very open, specification for your design and engineering teams to utilize. It just starts to put guardrails around what your expectations are. And I think the last concern would be, is it going to integrate with existing conditions? So that goes back to the acquisition discussion that we just had. And so how is it going to work with the existing systems? And sometimes it won't, but over time, can you start to make adjustments where it will? But I think those are the top concerns that I hear about standards.
How do you counter that, or how do you kind of put someone's mind at ease about those challenges with standards?
Well, and I think it ties into the pricing, so as if our team's involved, we're not looking at it just from a performance standpoint. We're also looking at it from a pricing standpoint, and we're looking at it for a particular duration, and it's tied to a potential opportunity for that supplier. So we'll identify, is this a year? Is this 3 years? Is it 5 years? What's the potential volume that could be coming? So we're typically looking again at that aggregation of volume a health system may have. And I think, many suppliers find that very attractive, and they respond, by giving pricing that would be representative of the opportunity that's being given to them. So versus the price being inflated, we actually see it being more competitive, and we also see it, there's other value adds that typically come along with that. So we could be getting training, we could be getting spare parts, we could be getting an extended warranty, and then again, I touched on like having those parameters around what the products would be, and making sure it's not limited, so that there's still a lot of variation and product selection available to be designed around.
So Christine, we have a lot of electrical contractors are a big part of our audience. We work with them day to day on things, and I'm curious, can they play a role in either setting the standards, or is there some part they can play in this whole process?
Yeah, absolutely. So they absolutely can be part of this process, and they're an integral part. In fact, when I think about standards, I think about achieving the best value, and that may be the seat on the stool, and the stool is supported by multiple legs, and those legs are the electrical contractor, MEP contractor, any contractor, the manufacturer, the general contractor, the owner, all us, Vizient included. So all of us have a voice and a role in helping to deliver the best value. And my experience in working with electrical contractors or any contractor is that, they're a wealth of knowledge from the standpoint of constructability, technical aspects. And so we rely on that in part of this process. And oftentimes that supplier or contractor may even be able to help write the specification, to make sure it's dialed in the right way. So giving constructability feedback, either on specs that are being written or, and certainly to the part of as the project is being engineered, giving that constructability. But I think it's really about a new way of thinking, maybe, set and being willing to be a little bit more transparent. This is for all of us, right? All of us that are involved in being that stool and the support to delivering best value. So being transparent, being collaborative, and relying on each other to deliver the best that we can for a health system. And I really believe that together, working together, we are better together. And so I'm a big believer in working, side by side, and would love actually some creative ideas from electrical contractors or Gray Bar actually comes to us quite often with ideas and new technologies a lot of times. So just really, opening up and being collaborative. And absolutely, there's a role for all of us to work together. Todd, in addition, I would suggest that, any contractor, an electrical contractor, what they could do at the beginning of a project is ask very specific questions around, do they have standards, especially if they're on a design assist type engagement. Are there standards or preferences that have been established for that health system? And try to understand that their objectives, the health system's objectives, and then knowing, helping be part of that support to ensure and drive that they're integrated into the overall project. So, again, just really focusing at the beginning of the project, understanding what the objectives are, the preferences around from the health system, and doing it early on versus at the time of procurement, or maybe even after procurement has happened. So after the job has been awarded, so do it early on.
You mentioned sustainability earlier. Obviously, I think that's on the mind of almost everybody, personal and business and everything. So you mentioned it. So what do you kind of hear around construction and sustainability in healthcare systems today? What are some top 3 things that they think about on that around that area?
Yeah, when you say sustainability, I think of where to start. And I think that this is how most health systems and probably most companies out there think where to start. So it's greater than just recycling, right? So sustainability is actually seen as the greatest risk to human health that exists out there. So it's the greatest risk to human life, I believe, is how they state it. So there's a significant impact, and focus on sustainability and what does that mean and what do we do? So, while health systems are becoming more and more sophisticated, they may or may not have expertise, in this space. And so, looking at the bigger picture and figuring out how to layer in sustainability, energy management, diversity, all of these things are coming into play. And they are part of the projects. As I mentioned earlier, there's requirements that need to be met in a lot of these spaces. And so, so where do we go with this? Where do we focus? And there's you may have heard of the signing of the White House health sector climate pledge. So that's, that many health systems have signed that. And it's a commitment to emissions reduction and climate resilience goals. And so, and supporting those. And so again, back to your question, well, how do we get there? So there's state mandates, there's community pressure, there's an economic, aspect of this. How do we know that the energy that we may be trying to use is going to be reliable? So if we're switching to wind or solar or, whatever it may be, how do we know it's going to be reliable? The biggest risk a hospital has is going down, and so their systems can't go down, never. And so how do they ensure that what they're implementing isn't going to impact that? And I think that's a big risk management factor that goes into consideration. Is there savings? You would hope that there's some long-term savings involved in any sustainability measure that they take on. And I think, one of the biggest challenges in this space, honestly, is that everybody is trying to touch it. And there's so many players in it. And yet, are they all really the right resource to utilize? And so, in one of your other questions, you talked about that network of is there a way to ask for recommendations either on, what's worked from a material or equipment or a supplier, to what worked, has it worked? And I feel like in sustainability, we need to have that foundation as well. Like, you need to have a network of references, who can you rely on to get a better understanding of something, you may be considering for implementation, and know, are you going to be, is it going to be a reliable solution for you, and who is right to align with. So I will tell you, focusing in on energy and trying to enhance what Vizient offers from an energy standpoint. I have a lot of conversations, and a lot of people say, yeah, we do this. Okay, you do this, but do you do this in the Northeast as well as the Southwest? Do you do this in Texas? And so really understanding, what do you mean by we do this, or we can support nationwide? There's probably in this space very few people that truly do support, wholeheartedly nationwide. And so I feel like it's important to understand anybody's sweet spot. And even if they come with a multi-pronged solution, okay, but where's your sweet spot? And then where do you work? And where is your sweet spot in that? And so I think the biggest risk that we can do in dealing with health systems is taking on a partner that may not really have the experience or the knowledge of working with the health system. And so having, knowing if they've got that experience is really important. But at the same time, we need to help people grow with that experience. So it's like a balance, of knowing who's a solid go-to today, but also continuing to build that network of resources available to tap into. And I'm not the expert on sustainability. I'm learning as quickly as everybody else is. But I will tell you that Vizient is invested in this space, as well as energy and diversity. We're significantly invested in here and building out a team of experts and solutions that can be taken to any of our health systems and implemented. And the way that Vizient is approaching sustainability is really around, we've got a trusted network, so it's those health systems that are working with us, we're working with them, and industry partners. And we actually make this available to our competitors. Anything that we have done in the way of sustainability, we will share with others openly. And that's because we really believe in building up that network of solutions that can be deployed.
What are a couple steps a healthcare system can implement to start moving towards a more strategic perspective on construction and implementing standards?
So that's a great question, Todd. So they could, of course, engage Vizient. That would be an option. But I think really just as a team, maybe the vice president or director, whoever is overseeing construction, determining what is the overall objective of that hospital or health system. Is it to continue maintaining your current footprint? Are you growing? And then looking at what do you need to do, or what would help you be if you are in a growth state? What would maybe help you accelerate that? I mentioned that by having some parameters documented, a lot of people have it in their head. You go to a smaller health system, maybe a single hospital, and you ask them, oh, do you have a preference? Do you like what type of door hardware do you use? And they've got it in their head, but it's not written down anywhere. So if you spend the time, and it does take time, but if you spend the time to document what your preferences are, it will ease your projects in the future. And if you are at a point where you have a larger building program, I think consider, is there something that could be done maybe strategically to get in front of that building program and have some parameters around what your objectives are for the materials and equipment that are going into it. And certainly with electrical being a little challenging for the next couple of years still from a supply chain standpoint, do you need to build in some contingencies in order to make sure that your project isn't impacted? And it's not just electrical. There's other areas that are continuing to be impacted. But knowing, what are those triggers that could potentially impact something even more? So we had a scenario where doors, there was a custom color being requested for the door, and that took it from I don't know, let's just say 20 weeks and it doubled it, And so something so small as that can really send you outside of the norm of a traditional delivery time frame for a product. So I think, if you do want to be more strategic, in your projects, I really do believe in having something down on paper as far as what your expectations are, and own those expectations. In the end, everybody works for you, and so you should be setting what your quality and performance requirements are for your building. And if you want to move towards something, more sustainable or more energy management focused, also have that in mind, and then consider who the right resources are to help you support whatever your objectives are.
Well, Christine, you talked about, a healthcare system thinking about their why and their objectives. So I do like to close out the conversation by refocusing on the why of what my guest does. So what motivates you to do this day in and day out? What keeps you excited and passionate about what you do?
So I love projects. I love collaborating with various stakeholders, whether it be a health system, whether it be a supplier and a contractor. And what I love even more is delivering a win. And is that win, is it pricing? Is it, a project done on time? Is it in budget? Is it we help solve some type of unique problem for them? So some type of a win. I love delivering that win. And while I'm not a clinical person, I feel like the work that I do helps hospitals, medical centers, health systems do what they need to do. So I'm happy to be a piece of the puzzle that helps them, ultimately serve the communities that they exist in.
Well, Christine, thank you so much. You've shared some cool information. I learned a lot by our time together. So it's been great having you on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, that was my conversation with Christine Dickinson, Principal, Facilities, Capital, and Construction at Vizient. You can connect with Christine and what she's working on by heading to the links in the show notes. I would love to hear what you're doing to create a more strategic approach to your construction plans. You can email them to me at podcast@graybar.com. If you enjoyed this episode, you can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving a 5-star rating in your favorite podcast player and on YouTube. Thanks for listening or watching this episode of Keeping the Lights On. We'll see you next time. All right, let's do that again, the whole thing. Well, that was my conversation with Christine Dickinson, Principal, Facilities, Capital, and Construction for Vizient. You can connect with Christine and what she's working on by heading to the links in the show notes. I would love to hear what you're doing to create a more strategic approach to your construction plans. You can email me at podcast@graybar.com. If you enjoyed this episode, you can help us grow this show by subscribing and leaving a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast player and YouTube. Hey, thanks for listening and watching to this episode of Keeping the Lights On. We'll see you next time.